everyone, and welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Peterson, and I'm an outpatient mental health and substance abuse therapist for the Harbor Beach Hospital here. I've been doing a series of videos on mental health related topics, so I want to invite you actually to comment below if you have any ideas of any more content, anything you would like to hear about, and anything that I've talked about in the past that you want more information on. Please let me know because I want to continue these videos. So I want to know what people want to hear. But today I'm going to talk about PTSD. So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And the reason being I want to talk about it today is that tomorrow, which would be Saturday the 27th, is PTSD Awareness Day. And I think this is an amazing idea because I think PTSD is another disorder that has had a lot of misconceptions wrapped around it and a lot of things that just aren't true about it or we don't know about it. So today I'm going to just do a short video on some facts about PTSD. As always, I will put my resources in the comments section so that you will be able to see where I got my information from. So PTSD, according to the National Center for PTSD, about 7 or 8 people out of 100 will have PTSD, will experience PTSD at some point in their life. 7 or 8 out of 100, guys. I think that's pretty high for PTSD for a disorder that's not always well known. So 7 or 8 out of 100. Women are more likely than men to develop PTSD. And the big part here, the key, our genes. Our genes actually play a big part in who may develop PTSD over another person who's experiencing similar traumatic events. So one thing that I hear a lot is that people who may be diagnosed with PTSD, they think that that can't be true or they don't want it to be true because to them that means that they're weak. And that is entirely not true. As I'm just reading right now, and all the research, excuse me, is geared towards our genes, our our genes being this kind of factor, so common factor of genes and the sequences on who may develop PTSD. So I want you to really keep that in mind. And PTSD is an anxiety disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder is an anxiety disorder that involves the overactivation of that flight or fight response. So that may be where people are experiencing this PTSD. They may experience their body is telling them their body is telling their mind that they are in danger and in fear, even well after the traumatic event is over with. That flight or fight system is activated and it stays on. So I'm going to quote Dr. Van Kolk a lot. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk is a top researcher in PTSD. He's a psychiatrist. He's done a lot of work on PTSD. So I'm going to talk about his work a little bit. So he said the essence of your trauma is that it is an overwhelming, unbelievable, and unbearable experience that exceeds your present coping skills and is significantly upsetting. So I'll read that for you again. The essence of your trauma is that it is an overwhelming, unbelievable, and unbearable experience that exceeds your present coping skills and is significantly upsetting. So another common misconception about PTSD is that only war veterans will develop PTSD, that possibly nobody else with such traumatic experiences could develop that. And that is just simply not true. Now, a lot of the research was done initially with veterans, and I can imagine the traumatic experiences that they're bringing back with them. So I'm not discounting that whatsoever. I just want to spread awareness that PTSD is not only in war veterans. So I have a list according to the National Center of PTSD on some other traumas that it can be associated with. And again, I want to say that they do say that PTSD is associated mainly with war veterans, but we've also learned that some other traumatic events can be associated with PTSD. I'm going to read you some some traumatic events on their list, but I also want you to know that doesn't mean if you experience these traumatic events that you automatically have PTSD. So, like I said before, it could be a combination of current life events at the time, like Dr. Van Kolk said, coping skills at the time. What are your current level of coping skills when experiencing this traumatic event? Your genes and resiliency. Resiliency can play a huge factor. Some of the traumatic events they list are physical assault, serious illness like a heart attack or having cancer, military combat, sexual abuse, accident, so like a bad car accident, motorcycle accident, any other type of motor vehicle accident, child abuse or neglect, natural disaster, unemployment or sudden job loss, financial crash, and the sudden and unexpected death of a loved one. So, this is just a short list actually of traumatic events that can precede PTSD diagnosis. But when I was reading through some of these, I was just thinking about what's going on in the world right now and how many of the things that are going on in the world right now can be considered a traumatic event for a lot of people. We need to be really mindful of them. So again, of course, because if you've experienced one of these, this doesn't automatically qualify you to have PTSD, or doesn't mean that you have PTSD. This is a diagnosis that your doctor or therapist can give you, but that just goes to show you that there's a wide range of traumatic events that can precede PTSD. So nearly everyone will experience a range of reactions after trauma. So a range of reactions. It's on a spectrum. So after a traumatic event, but those with PTSD, those who have been diagnosed with PTSD, may feel stressed or frightened even when they're not in danger. Back to that activation of flight or fight response. Back to that activation, they may feel in danger. Those with PTSD may feel in danger even well after the traumatic event is over. And I got some of that information from the National Institute of Mental Health. And another thing that we should be aware of is that along with PTSD diagnoses, there can be co-occurring disorders. So you may see someone with PTSD that may have an eating disorder, that may have issues with substance abuse, depression, or insomnia. And when I kind of sum up the symptoms in a little bit here, you'll see why the insomnia part and eating disorder, substance abuse, depression, why that comes into play. And that, again, I'm not saying that if you have PTSD, you automatically have these other co-occurring syndromes, but I'm saying it's been common in PTSD to have some kind of co-occurring disorder with that. So PTSD can cause many types of symptoms that generally is grouped into three categories. So the first category you have is your re-experiencing symptoms. So your re-experiencing symptoms, these could be the flashbacks. So flashbacks is where that trauma is relived over and over again, and that can include an elevated heart rate, and excessive sweating. So flashbacks, nightmares, and so you can see where that comes into play with the insomnia. Nightmares and frightening thoughts that are very intrusive and you're not able to get them to go out of your head. So that was the re-experiencing symptoms. And now the second group is avoidance symptoms. So staying away from places, events, or objects that are reminders of that traumatic experience. And this is where it's impacting your daily life, your work. They gave an example that maybe something like a car accident happened at a corner, and it's going to take you longer to go around the corner and take a detour to get to work, and so you're running late to work because you don't want to drive by that corner again. And that's just an example, but staying away from places, events, or objects. So feeling emotionally numb, feeling strong guilt, depression, or worry, losing interest in activities that were once enjoyable in the past, and having trouble. Some people have trouble remembering the dangerous or traumatic event that they went through. So having fuzzy details or just not being able to remember it at all. So that was our second group. So Reexperiencing Symptoms was our first group, and that had the flashback nightmares and insomnia. Avoidance symptoms were the staying away from things, feeling numb, feeling strong guilt, depression, or worry, losing interest, having trouble remembering. And then our third group of symptoms is that those hyperarousal symptoms. So that may be being easily startled, feeling tense or on edge about something, or again, having difficulty sleeping or having very angry outbursts, so having that short fuse. And so those, of course, the DSM has those symptoms spread out a lot. There's a lot more in there involved, but these are just a quick overview of those three groups of symptoms that requires that PTSD diagnosis. And I want to go back to again Dr. Van Kolk. He has wrote a great book called "The Body Keeps the Score," and in there he talks about trauma being stored in your body as chronic pain. Actually, it's a really good book. I really suggest checking it out. I'm actually reading it right now. And so with PTSD, it is treatable. So, according to the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, there are a number of treatment techniques, sometimes combined with each other, that are being used in amount of success for PTSD. The first one is psychotherapy. So, psychotherapy interventions such as cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps people recognize their ways of thinking. So we call these our cognitive patterns. And we unwrap those and unravel those, and we can find out what's keeping you stuck in those cognitive patterns. Another one is exposure therapy. Now, this one is to be done by a very experienced therapist or doctor because this helps someone safely face what they fear in order to cope with it. A lot of places are using virtual reality devices to actually put people in that situation and experience that trauma again. So that's why I'm saying that takes a very skilled doctor or therapist to do that for you. And then there is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So we call this EDMR. And that combines exposure therapy with a series of guided eye movements that help people process traumatic memories and change the way they respond to those traumatic memories. Again, takes a very skilled person to be able to walk you through that because you're going to be to some degree reliving that traumatic experience and any sorts of psychotherapy interventions. And then there's some medications that have been used to success. And of course, I'm not going to list the specific medications because that's not my department, but I just want to say antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications have been proven to help ease some of the symptoms of PTSD. So that insomnia, those recurrent nightmares, it helps by blocking some of that adrenaline, extra adrenaline in the body. Remember that fight or flight response? These medications can help calm that down, the adrenaline down. And another side is that they're finding yoga to be really helpful alongside some of these interventions to aid in the relief of symptoms. And specifically, there's this new, well, not new, but there is this branch of yoga called trauma sensitive yoga. And if you look on even YouTube and you look at videos, there's lots of videos on trauma sensitive yoga. And they're saying that the objective of trauma sensitive yoga is not to access those emotions or dredge up these traumatic memories, but rather help people heighten their body awareness. So to notice what's happening inside of your bodies, and thereby learn how to release some tension, reduce and control fear and arousal, and tolerate sensations. So you're learning in trauma sensitive yoga, you're learning about your body and about your reactions and how to better control them. So you can see why that would be a great thing to add to any of the above interventions. So if you think that some of these symptoms, I know I went over them fast, but if you think that anything relates to you or whatever, please get the help. Please reach out and get the help, whether that be therapy, whether that be you start talking with your doctor. But please reach out to someone. This is a really important thing, and there is relief for your symptoms if you're feeling any. If you see this in a friend or family member, there is relief for those symptoms. There is interventions that work. So please reach out. Again, I always put the crisis numbers in the bottom section in the comment section, and please let me know what other videos you'd like to see, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.